host, More Yelvington of Morph Transform Your Reality, where I help women step out of trauma and reclaim their power. I'm so happy to have you here for this open conversation about moms, sex, motherhood, children, relationships, marriage, and everything in between. So grab your drink of choice and let's dive in.
So honored to have the beautiful Michele here with me. Hi, Michele.
Hi, happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm so excited to talk about this juicy conversation because I think it's definitely gonna get some ladies moist out there.
I hope so. If not, inspire and get some good ideas, fun ideas.
So, how about you tell us a little bit about you and what you do, and why are you here on the Moms Talk Sex podcast?
Yeah. Well, I am a mom to 4 kids. My background really I came from a very conservative, strict upbringing of how a woman, a wife, a mom should be. And I lived that life for many, many years, got young, started having children young. And really, I went through a midlife reawakening for not a crisis, a reawakening. And it was a very pivotal point in my life where I decided to break out of that mold that I had been confined to and really step into my true self and embrace my imperfections and my uniqueness and quirkiness and authenticity and really like it said, step into my feminine power. I am divorced and have remarried, and I really, I really like to help support women who are also going through a midlife reawakening, a rediscovery of their true self, and be able to find their happy and lead a more fulfilling and purposeful life moving forward.
I love that. So, what actually caused this reawakening? Like, what happened?
Well, like many of us moms do, we lose ourselves in motherhood. You start having kiddos, and your entire universe surrounds them, and that's exactly what happened to me. I lost myself in motherhood and being a wife and doing all the things and the school activities. And then as my kids started getting a little bit older and more independent, like they all ended up in school, like that final day where number 4 went to kindergarten, and all of a sudden I had free time on my hands. And what was I going to do? I mean, I clean the house, do laundry, but then what? So it really gave me a pause to think about where I was at and what interested me and what made me happy. And I realized I didn't have the slightest clue because I'd been so focused for the last 15 years on everyone else. Um, so I started with like little things. I started at that time, it was just really Facebook. I joined in Facebook groups. YouTube was really big. I tried to find anyone that their message resonated with me in a self-love, self-help way, kind of trying to help me rediscover. Um, at the time, I was pretty unhealthy. I was pre-diabetic with chronic hypertension. And so I was like, well, that's a good place to start. I'm going to start focusing on my health.
Yeah.
And really that's was the catalyst into my journey. I started focusing on my health, taking care of me, and through the process of reading and self-discovery and learning how to, you know, let go and forgive like my mistakes, and realizing that I was made perfectly the way that I was, and
Yeah.
breaking out of that mindset that I've been raised with was so huge. And I finally got to a spot where I was like, F it, you either like me or you don't,
Yeah.
take me as I am, because now I love who I am. I'm on a higher vibration, and welcome all the high vibe people.
I love it. So, um, you said you're divorced, and so I'm curious, or you got divorced and remarried, happily
Mhm.
remarried.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, and we are talking about sex.
Mhm.
So was that related at all?
Yes, very much so. Throughout our entire marriage, I had married a very conservative man, and of course, my upbringing was very conservative. Um, but I also knew from a very young age that I was very sexually inquisitive
Mhm.
and and really had a high sex drive from like puberty on. Um, and that honestly, that's part of the reason why I settled with a conservative man too, because I knew this high sex drive wasn't how I was supposed to be. Thinking about sex and wanting sex all the time wasn't how I was supposed to be. So I settled. And so I had a pretty conservative marriage sexually. And as I started coming back into myself and rediscovering Michelle,
Yeah.
um, this passion, this need for more sex and more exciting sex really came into the picture. And my ex-husband didn't even know what to do with it. you know, and it was difficult because there was it's we did have conversations um about sex, about me wanting more sex, and it was kind of just put to the wayside as well. um I would always try to initiate or different things, but um and ultimately I really gave up and just kind of resorted to toys, to be honest, to fill that need, which I also had to keep pretty secret
Yeah.
because that was not what I was supposed to be doing. So it did. This reawakening, it totally brought me back into a place that I knew was more authentic to me. And ultimately it brought a lot of insecurities up for my ex-husband, and the marriage became very controlling. He was always suspicious of me. It took you too long going to the bank. Did you stop along the way? So it became very controlling, very psychologically abusive. And ultimately, I ended up walking away. Um, uh, I'm super transparent. So since this goes along with our topic, I'd like to share what that moment was when I literally said, screw this, I'm over it.
Yeah.
He had been arranging my clothing in my toy drawer, so he knew whenever I would play without him. And one morning I was home. He came home a little early and went straight to my drawer and opened it and confronted me on, having me time that morning, sexy time that morning. And yeah, he called me out on it, didn't like it. What was I doing with it? Was I, sexting other people? All these things that were so outlandish.
Yeah.
And it was at that point I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so, yeah. So the sex side is really there's so many other things, but it was a big catalyst in why I left the marriage.
Yeah, it's so hard to be with somebody that doesn't have as big of a sex drive as you,
Mhm.
and finding ways to not make you wrong about it.
Mhm.
And I think the big part of talking about this topic and why I created this podcast in the first place is to show women that they're not alone, right? And it goes to each direction. We have women that are overly sexual and are all about it, and women that are feeling the exact opposite.
Mhm.
And they don't know how to bring back that spark and how to create that in within them. And there is no right or wrong way,
Yeah.
right? I think as
Right.
long as you're in a relationship, in a marriage with someone that desires to have the same goals and outcome as you and cares about you and you care about them, you find a way to connect and talk and create that intimacy between you two. But the first key is obviously communication.
Yes. Communication and holding that safe space for each other to be vulnerable, to be able to talk about sex. And if it's not something that is a commonplace in your marriage, then it's a very difficult subject to talk about. And you're worried about judgment or worried about hurting the other person's feelings. And yeah, it can be very, very difficult. So it's almost like you have to lay ground rules before having the conversation. Okay, no one's going to get butt hurt. We're talking freely and openly, and we're helping to grow together in our marriage.
Yes, and I think that is really powerful to talk to those women that need to have these conversations, because you were in their feet, right? You were in their shoes, not in their feet. And so what was something, I mean, obviously it seems like because you came from such a constrictive background, most religious people really come from really religious, heavy religious backgrounds, where sex is really shameful and painful, and you don't talk about it, don't talk about it, right? And so we don't talk about it when we think we're the problem, and we blame our shame ourselves, blame ourselves, shame ourselves, right? And so I'm really curious, like, how did you find the courage to even bring that up when this is something you just don't talk about?
Yeah, because it became something that was so important, such an important piece of me. And so I knew that um, that it had to be something that we talked about, and something that we had to try to work out together, because it was such an integral part of me that had been suppressed for so long. Um, and It was super difficult. It was super difficult to get through that shame piece and really that fear of judgment. And I mean, I'm not going to lie. Sometimes we were like, you know, in the act of sex, and I would just like spring something on him, just be a little adventurous, take him by surprise. It didn't happen very often, but you know, um, yeah, he'd come home for lunch and I try, get in a quickie. So, finding those like little opportunities to meet your needs, but it was very difficult. And for me, I now have a bigger voice, and more brave with my voice. But in that marriage, a lot of times I would write notes like high school, but it was easier for me to communicate my feelings by putting it on paper and giving him, leaving a little note for him. And so we often corresponded, more serious matters that way, because it was easier to not feel that judgment or that fear by doing it. So that's an idea out there,
I
writing
love
little
that.
notes. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's the easier way, but you're still getting it out.
Yeah, and you're not bottling it in, which makes it even worse, right? Because if we're not
Yeah.
processing what we're going through, and we're not talking about it or sharing about it or writing about it, we're carrying this big grudge, and this
Mhm,
grudge doesn't go away. It just keeps getting bigger, and it's going to destroy. So
mhm,
I love the tools that you're sharing. Writing a note, I think it's great. Trying something out of the ordinary and seeing how the other person can
mhm,
kind of play with you, right? Get more
mhm.
excited. What are other tools? I'm curious because you said that you really had to overcome that. So can you take us back to what did it take for, or how were you able to overcome that? Maybe what were you able, how were you able to step into that?
Step into like my sexual self.
Or
Mm,
just into
yeah.
your power and just to share about it with
Mm.
him, right? Like you were
Okay.
saying.
Yeah. Well, like it was a pretty difficult conversation to have. So, I would tried to create opportunities. I would really push for like date nights or a night away. Sometimes well, I'm not going to say it is really hard to have a fun sex life in a home full of children.
Yes. I
and
agree.
as soon as you close that door, as soon as you lock the door, someone's going to need something from you. So, so a lot of our best moments were when we did a night away, had the grandparents watch the kids or something and got a night away, because then not only could we fully relax, but I mean, it just kind of that ability to fully relax also just kind of open up the gates to be more, sensual and explore and take time rather than having to have sex in 5 minutes because someone's going to be knocking on your door.
Right.
So for me, I found that trying to create opportunities really helped, in that sexual connection.
I love it. I think this is all great. And I also want to thank you because I think it's really awesome of you to come here and be vulnerable and share so other women can also start doing the same and
Yeah.
find their voice. I think it's so important. I think it's so important.
Yeah, the communication, the talking piece is so important. And trust me, I have so been there where I haven't had any sex drive because I'm exhausted being a mom. And I mean, having a kid on my boob all day is like the last thing I want is to be touched. Like I have so been there. But I mean, like I said, eventually the kids start growing up and you do start rediscovering or want to bring a little bit more life back into your life. And so just taking baby steps, looking for opportunities and good communication, whether that's spoken or through notes or kind gestures, like, just that reconnection piece and moving forward together is huge.
Yes, I love that so much. Well, thank you so much for taking
Mm.
your time and joining me. This was really insightful. And I know we're going to bring you back for a little
Yes.
kink
Yes.
conversation in the future. So I'm really excited for this. So you guys tune into that when Michele comes back. And this is the first step, right? The first step is communication, baby steps, and reaching out. So I really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If this was a contribution to you, please share, like, love, and comment. I would love to hear from you more, and make sure to follow us on Morph Healing. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and remember, you are here for a reason. I see you. Love, more.